I'm always looking for founders to kind of reflect, share their Ikigai. It's this Japanese word that means reason for being that I just absolutely love because I think when the going gets tough, those are the roots. That's the depth that these founders have to go to keep running the marathon, right? Keep playing a really hard game. So.
Hey everyone, Alastair here, and thanks for tuning in to the Venture Variety Show. I'm really excited to bring you today's guest. This episode features Kira Noodleman, a partner at B Partners. And if you're curious about deep tech, AI, and founder psychology, then you're in for a real treat. Kira shares her unique path from product roles in Brazil and Argentina to pre-seed investing in robotics, space manufacturing, and biomachines. We talk about how B Partner supports founders not just with capital, but through collaboration and even yoga. So if you're building at the edge of science and humanity, or you're advising those who are, this episode's for you. Let's get into it and meet Kira.
Yeah, so I actually grew up in the heart of Silicon Valley, but that is not the origin story of me getting into VC. So my path to venture, at least when I got in, which was about 8 years ago now, wasn't considered traditional because I worked in product management. I worked across San Francisco, Brazil, and Argentina, and I learned a lot of invaluable lessons about entrepreneurship through a couple pivotal projects that then led me to my steps to venture. So the first one I worked with was Virgin Mega, and we were trying to bring this concept of a kind of like line around the corner physical store product drop to the digital world. Kind of like the way Apple product releases would sort of have people like sleeping outside the store the night before. This was a startup, but it happened to have had Richard Branson on the board. It was like Virgin Mega's technological comeback. They had to close all their doors in the US around when iTunes came out. And so the takeaway for me was having that type of person on involved in a company actually doesn't guarantee success. It was an amazing project. It was also incredibly hard. Another project I worked on was with Google ATAP, which is one of their innovation labs. And it was on something called Project Aura. And it was this 100+ person team. I was involved in both Mountain View and working with a team in Argentina. There was a team over in Asia, and we had effectively unlimited resources and still couldn't bring a product to market. And we had not even just 2 years, but 3 years. And to be fair, the product was a very challenging product from a technical perspective. It was a modular smartphone. So it's not like this was easy, but still these experiences crystallized a really important lesson for me that just building massive businesses isn't just about talent and money. It's about timing and it's about execution. And there's a lot of, and I got really curious too about the founder ingenuity. And after those experiences, I went to business school. I wanted to focus more broadly on innovation. So came back from South America. And that was my steps. I actually had a mentor say I was working for an accelerator for free. It was one of the many clubs in business school. And she saw just how much energy doing the work gave me. And she asked, hey, have you considered venture? And so that was actually the moment, not in childhood, but really then in my late 20s when I first considered venture. And I was especially drawn to a firm like B, where we're pre-seed, we're at that kind of early inception stage, pre-product. And I was really excited at this possibility or opportunity to help founders navigate those really critical early decisions on company building.
Yeah, you mentioned B Partners, pre-seed investor. What's the focus of the firm?
We believe machines will win. And I think today that might seem a little bit obvious, but we started saying this and developing this thesis back in 2018, right around when I started at the firm. And what that means is machining is really outpacing human capacity and capability. And what that translated to for us on a thesis perspective was focusing on deep tech. And the way I define deep tech, and I would acknowledge, I think deep tech has reached peak hype in the industry. But to me, it's all about taking a core technological risk off the table. So for example, one of our companies is manufacturing chips in space, and it's just something that's never been done before. So there's a lot of technical de-risking to make that a reality. And it's challenging, right? Because it involves a lot of different I call them deep tech deltas, but like things that are really different about building a deep tech startup. There's CapEx, there's regulatory, there's long sales cycles. You're building often in the physical world. So I think the thing about deep tech that I've been learning and navigating and enjoying at B is like, it's hard and therefore fewer investors focus there. Like it used to be about 10% of venture dollars went to deep tech. And I think it's because of how challenging it really is. And so I would say in terms of B, we're very asset light in our approach to deep tech. So we think about what software powered, how do we kind of innovate more maybe in the digital world and reduce some of that physical world risk. And we also bring partnership to the table. And that's what I was talking about a little bit before of like, what does it mean to collaborate with these founders at the early stage? How do we maximize the chances that they're going to be successful? We all know kind of at different stages of series seed to A to B and so on, like there's really varying degrees of will a company actually be successful. And so, the name of our game is how do we maximize a company getting to those later stages?
I'm happy you define deep tech because I was going to ask about that. And you mentioned machines. So does it include everything? Machines, AI, robotics? Is it space tech?
Yeah.
Is it climate tech? Do you define it that broadly?
Yeah. So yes, and I can get more granular.
Yeah, I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, so like on one hand, I would say it's anything on the technological cutting edge. That's just like we'll talk about timing and we'll say it's just coming out of the lab and it's like just finally at that point where it's ready to be commercialized. And that's say in the window of 2 to 4 years, it can hit market. So there's a piece there. But to be a little more specific, we've got kind of like three atomic units, if you will, of how we think about investing. And so we've got the human, and we call this theme like human machine interaction. And what I'm talking about here is humans getting machine superpowers. That's co-pilots. That's it's kind of me. Yeah, it's like if I'm a novice at something and going from 5% knowledge being able to operate at 80% knowledge perhaps in a new field. And this is a lot of software innovation. Then there's the atomic unit of the machine, and we talk a lot about like machine to machine interaction, and why I put those two, like machine and machine, next to each other is it's about reducing the human in the loop and like getting to the point of increased machine autonomy. So that's a lot of robotics, logistics, manufacturing. Also, these days, it's how do we bring that type of technology into other settings, like in hospitals, like in, in recycling, in kind of areas that previously might have been untouched. And then our third area, we used to call it biological machines, or like maybe said another way, just symbio, kind of future food, ag, materials. But these days I'm thinking of it more of an atomic unit of a factory and like factories of the future and what are alternative ways to do manufacturing. So in the case of biomachines, okay, that's biomanufacturing, that's precision fermentation. But I mentioned manufacturing ships in space, like in space manufacturing is a factory of the future. And there's some other examples of different types of material synthesis that like you just couldn't have done yesterday. So they're really novel ways of production. And something I really love too about that theme is often there is a climate benefit. They're often carbon reducing. They're often just like there's efficiencies inherent to sort of what those solutions are. So that's nerd alert over here. That's if we really got detailed. How we think about investments when they come through the door.
Amazing. It's not just nerdy, which is great. It's like top of mind. You mentioned it's a very hype sector right now. This is what everyone is talking about right now, right? It's the zeitgeist.
Totally. And what's so fun is that, because I think there's something that's really interesting that's changed with AI and LLMs and generative AI, with deep tech in particular. So on one hand, it's always been this way of really bringing science fiction into reality. Like those are the kinds of books I read when I'm trying to, one, just relax, but two, kind of feel for some inspiration of what the future might look like. So there's sort of this like reality that's coming online faster than ever, faster than any other innovation cycle. We're calling it a super cycle. But what's really different in the last couple of years, and I think why it's now like so topical, is the convergence of AI with deep tech. And so we're radically compressing innovation cycles. And so, for example, we're seeing thousands of virtual experiments before you might ever do a single physical test. So what that really does is that unlocks this previously impossible capital efficiency. I mean, I talked about what's hard about deep tech. One of the things is typically a high capex, right? But this is among many things like this is something AI is changing, the way we can efficiently build that kind of business. So I think, and like maybe to say this in a different way that perhaps folks might just recognize because they've seen an example of it, the protein folding model, AlphaFold, it, I'm talking about like AlphaFold impacts to traditional workflows. So for example, in the case of AlphaFold, scientists now like start projects by checking AlphaFold's protein structure predictions before they even plan an experiment. It's like they're checking digitally along the way before and also during the physical tests that they're actually going to be doing. That's kind of the like bigger picture that we're also already seeing play out today that I think is incredibly exciting and like what's really giving a tailwind to deep tech.
Yeah, it seems like a good place to segue to the entrepreneur, and talk about how you've mentioned it a little bit, how you're supporting the entrepreneur. What are the challenges and the opportunities in the sector, right, in the broad sector right now for
Yeah.
entrepreneurs, and how's B Partners supporting the next
Yeah.
the next wave of founders?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think what our founders face as their biggest challenge and opportunity is that they're pathfinding, they're forging new paths, they are charting waters that have never been crossed before. And then I mentioned these deep tech deltas that they have these different set of challenges, right, that they're facing in building those businesses. And so, like we help in a lot of different ways, and trying to like think it's just this long tail of things we do. I mean, I'd say there's resources, there's connections, there's a lot of things that are table stakes that I hope all VCs offer, and we do that too. But I would say the real maybe delta of perhaps how we maybe could make a difference is like the collaboration that we bring to the table. So one of our companies in our portfolio, they're named Reshape Automation, and they help SMB manufacturers, which is 98% of the manufacturers out there. They're not automated yet, and they help them build and first design and build robotic work cells. And like, it's really designing automation and then seeing, sometimes digitizing is innovation, and like that's your design. And then sometimes you want to bring like a full blown machine, a robot into the picture. But either way, the point is it was this low code LLM powered, chat powered tool and changing the UX completely for this non-technical user that was actually the innovation here. So, and why do I bring that up? Because Juan, the founder, so he had a product at one of our other robotics companies, and he and I talked for months before he started his company. And he has told me, I wouldn't have landed on this concept without our conversations and collaboration. And that was also the basis of him making room for me in his, what was a really competitive pre-seed and then seed round. And so, yeah, that's just one example, but, I think a lot of things at this point with how accessible information is can be seen as more table stakes. And I hope to bring an impact, and I hope that B brings that impact through some of that deeper formative collaboration.
The firm also uses content, you podcasting, video, you do educational seminars. How else are you supporting startups?
Yeah.
And you have some initiatives too, right?
Yeah, definitely. This is a fun one. For sure. So I'll name a few things I've been developing and leading, and then also like B as a whole, we all have this ethos and it just shows up differently as a team. So I can mention a few of those examples too. So one thing I started a year-ish ago is a podcast called Pathfinders. Obviously the concept we've covered here, but where it came from was there's so much narrative in building deep tech companies for founders and investors in that process of like fundraising and then the company building of your customers and your hires. Like there's so much there, but I struggled to find a place and a conversation where that was being discussed in a podcast or a show or, anything like that. So I thought, okay, there's something here. And then beyond just wanting to talk about it, because pathfinding and forging your own path, which is something, I personally identify with in my own journey, but it's not just under the guise of like, I'm building an amazing company. It's a personal journey too. Like it's really, really hard. And so I wanted to both reflect and shine a light on the personal journey of it. And then I also wanted to share these stories in the form of like nuggets of insight. So not long form, but rather 15, 20-minute episodes that are more like snapshots of playbooks. To give you one example, one of our companies, they're called Interplant. They make plants into living sensors. It's an ag tech play. And one of the focuses of the episode, or like this one of the episodes with her, was about, instead of a minimum viable product, which she eventually got to, she actually had to start with a minimum viable ecosystem because of how that world works. And so tons of partnerships. And like in the end, John Deere led her Series A, but she was thinking of those partnerships from the pre-seed. I mean, it's a really different way to build a company. And so, yeah, what something that the heart of Pathfinders is, I am always looking for founders to kind of reflect, share their Ikigai. It's this Japanese word that means reason for being, that I just absolutely love, because I think when the going gets tough, those are the roots. That's the depth that these founders have to go to keep running the marathon, right? Keep playing a really hard game. So
I love the idea of Pathfinders diving into like the personal journey. For me, from my experience covering venture and working with entrepreneurs over the years, it's something that's not talked about too much, I think, right? I mean, yeah, you want to learn the details of pitching, of working with VCs, how to, what do certain terms mean? But yeah, oftentimes it seems personal journey is not top of mind. It's not the thing, front burner type of material. Is that what you find? Is that why you focused Pathfinders? Why you focused the podcast on that?
yeah, I mean, it's dual, right? Because it certainly covers things about deep tech company building. But yeah, I mean, to me, business at the heart of it, it's about people. And when you're talking about, and Pathfinders is not only for pre-seed founders in terms of who I interview, but like any company that starts at the pre-seed starts with a team and a dream, and it's a founder, and it's that founder forging the way. There's just something incredibly human about the way these companies are built, that it felt like I wanted to represent that. I wanted that. Those stories are just as big of a part of the story of a company's product market fit, and also being on the inside. We always joke that our most important job on the board, or even just in just normal relationships with any of our founders, is being a chief psychology officer. But my number one priority, it's kind of like Maslow's hierarchy. It's like, how are they as a human has to be the starting point before we can get into everything else. And so something too that goes with that is, I actually see it as a huge positive when founders have a coach or have a weakness that they identify that they really want to work on. I'm like, yes, I work on those things too. Other founders I respect, and the best ones I know, have had a team of coaches along the way. So what I was saying is just kind of, no matter where you're coming from, even if you're a seasoned executive, it's different being a startup founder. There's just a different set of challenges ahead. So long story short, we talk a lot about wanting our founders to also grow into the executives that'll run a public company, and helping bridge that transition, by being part of their team and helping them build out that team. And so, yeah, there's so many elements to the personal journey. I mean, one other thing to mention is it's really important to me before I invest to know who this person is as a human outside of a boardroom. And so something I used to do, especially like pre-COVID, I did it every time, was take founders to a yoga class, which I'm a yoga teacher. I used to teach a deal flow yoga class to VCs and founders, and whether I took them to my class or we went to just a class in SF, it was just a nice way to see someone in the real world and just build the relationship from the right place. And also, you pick up really important cues of how that person operates in the world by just spending some time with them in different contexts.
Yeah, talking about personal journey, a question I really want to ask you about is where you're located, because B Partners based in San Francisco, and you used to be, well, you grew up in Silicon Valley, and your venture journey started out here in the Bay Area, but you've since moved to Denver. You were there for a couple of years, I think, during the pandemic. And then more recently, you relocated to New York. So three different hotspots for startup activity, for venture. First of all, I think your Denver trip happened right at the onset of the pandemic, right? When people were,
Yep.
were exploring
Yeah.
more
Yes.
remote working.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
what have you learned from your experience over the last 5+ years of
Yeah.
living in various cities? Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So This is such a fun question because each of these cities is so different. And my home base, my starting point, obviously was San Francisco. I, moved right to San Francisco after Berkeley. And as we both know, San Francisco is the center of the venture universe. It's like 60 to 70% of venture dollars come through the Bay Area. I call them engines of innovation, but there's universities like Cal and Stanford and all the labs in those universities where a lot of innovation comes from. You've got these days, you don't just have Silicon Valley. These days we have Cerebral Valley in SF, and it's all right. There's nurturing of startups and big tech alike. And in that sense, it's this really amazing synergistic ecosystem that is just like a well-known quantity. And so 2020, July is when I first moved to Denver from San Francisco. This was, like you said, the beginning of a really more commonly widely accepted remote work. And obviously it was by necessity at the time. No one knew when the pandemic was going to end. And there was ecosystems like Denver, like Austin, that were really having a lot of influx from especially the coasts. And when I first moved to Denver, the venture market, and it's predominantly a seed market, which is another good fit for B, but it had been $3 billion a year in venture funding. And then by the time I was there for 4 years, it had doubled to 6 billion within a couple of years of me being there. That was really interesting to me, to be in a high growth market. San Francisco was always big. Like, this was like, okay, something is changing fundamentally in how the regional ecosystems are being built. And I love the strong community values in Denver. Like, there's this concept of giving before taking and just deep collaboration. Again, that was a natural fit with how B does business. I also think in the growth I mentioned, I had a lot of fun helping build it. Like, I organized deep tech dinners, and I helped organize Boulder Startup Week's robotics track a few different years. And it's a really livable, affordable city. People are generally just pretty happy. A VC founder hangs around the slopes versus the golf course. It's just, it's a totally different vibe. And so then came New York. I moved to New York a month ago, so 2025. And I can't think of a more opposite place to Denver than New York. What's fascinating is the intersection for me. I mean, one, this is a city that literally never sleeps, and that feels true for me and just how I'm operating in venture here. So one, I'm just like loving the vibrancy, the high vibe energy. And it's really interesting because it's an intersection of tech with traditional industries. And so like the Bay, right? No matter how you look at it, it's got a higher density of engineering talent, venture founders, but New York wins all day, every day in one key way, and it's density of customers across all kinds of industries like finance, media, publishing, material science, climate, big tech, and so on, right? So I think that is a really interesting piece of what I'm really exploring here, aside from, of course, deepening with deal flow opportunities.
Well, I know it. It's pretty obvious for anyone who follows you and the work you do, that, you support underrepresented founders personally and through the firm, Be Partners. Why is that important? And, how are you from doing that, helping to create a more inclusive culture?
Well, the answer is there's a lot of different things we're doing. I think the biggest thing we can do is show up with our actions and not just words. And so, while this effort is not just about metrics for us, something I am really proud of is in our Fund 3, 40% of that fund has female founders. 20% of our companies have founders that are underrepresented minorities, but like beyond those numbers, which are great, they're getting closer to what I consider parity. But I think it's about building an ecosystem that better reflects the demographics of our country. And so I've approached that through multiple ways. And one is through the funders, through VCs. So I've co-organized a group called EVCA, the Emerging Venture Capital Association. There's a female funders community I've been organizing for 6 years, focusing on building out networks, playbooks, and really learning the wisdom of women that have come before us. And another way I've showed up on the venture side is that I've hired and mentored 2 of our 5 team members in the past couple of years, and one of whom is a female, and she's Latina, and she's on our investing team. So those are a couple couple things on the VC side. On the founder side, I've been on Skydeck Berkeley's DEI committee for the last 5+ years. I used to host a female and non-binary accelerator at the B Partners office. It's called Violet Society. It's an accelerator. And then another thing I've done that supports really specifically B founders is modified our term sheet. And there's a mandate or like a strong suggestion really about how to employ fair hiring practices. And it doesn't come with just, hey, founders, you need to figure this out, but rather like, this is a best practice, and that's why we want you to do your best to meet it. And also, here's how B can help you access more of these folks to hit this. So yeah, it's whether it's on the VC or founder side, really put a lot of energy into this. My colleague Tim Smith is on the for the National Black MBA Association. He's helped run their venture competition for several years over now. And I would say DEI feels more important than ever today because it's certainly, by many measures, fallen out of public favor. And what I've been reading about is social movement scholars are calling it like closed doors, where there's the obvious route for change is no longer easily accessible. And so I really believe like now more than ever, we have to nurture this collective identity of within the DEI community and preserve the collective memory and reframe and adapt, of course, as is appropriate, as is needed for the changing world around us. But like, I think now matters more than ever.
Yeah, I would agree. And yeah, your actions speak loudly. And yeah, it's impressive. I went from modifying the term sheets to just, the numbers itself of who you founded, who you've worked with, and so forth. That's
Thanks.
great. That's great, Kira.
Yeah.
And now more than ever, probably it's a good time for that. Well, yeah, winding down here, Kira, any final words?
Like, I think venture is fundamentally changing because of what's happening with AI right now. The days of like 100-person team launching a product are over. I think in the next 5-10 years, we're going to see the most disruptive startups being these like tiny superpowered teams leveraging AI and like 5 people in an AI stack accomplishing maybe what 50 did. And like a Series A company might have 10 people and 100 AI agents and like a worldwide network of contractors. Like it's gonna look really different. And I think humans have just as important as a role as they ever did, but that like the shape of these companies is gonna be different. And I think this capital efficiency, this change means the next unicorn or decacorn even may only raise a seed round or a couple rounds of venture funding. And so I think my final thought is it's just never been a better time to be an early stage founder or investor. And if you're figuring out what that reality like means to you, I would love to talk to you.
Yes, it definitely seems transformational. As Sam Altman has said that we're going to see a unicorn with just one person, right? With the founder.
Yeah. At the extreme, we probably will. So yeah, no, building a startup today looks incredibly different. And I think VCs are needing to adapt just as much as these founders are.
And what's the best way for people to touch base with you? Is it LinkedIn? What should people do to follow Kira?
Yeah, 2 things. You can hit me up on LinkedIn, shoot me a message, comment on a post. And then also we have a form on our website, whether you want to get funded and you can send us your pitch and information, or if you just want to work with us as an advisor, be collaborative, we have a different easy form to fill out for that as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kira. It's great to touch base with you, and congratulations on your New York relocation. And yeah, I look forward to hearing more about all your efforts from Pathfinders to all the deep tech seed stage companies that you're funding. Can't wait to see what's next.
Thanks, Alastair. Super fun to chat with you.
Likewise. Thanks for listening to the Venture Variety Show. I hope you enjoyed that episode with Kira Noodleman. If you did, please hit like, remember to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone you think would find it valuable. And if you're on YouTube, you can also check out my other podcast, The AI Cognitive Shift, which I co-host in partnership with AInews.com. And if you've got feedback or guest suggestions, drop me a note or leave a comment. That's it for now. See you next time.